Hi, welcome and thank you for watching this short video about making kombucha. My name is Chris Kramer and I live here in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and I connected with Bounty and Soul, a marvelous organization here in Black Mountain, and we were talking about creating a little informational video on how to make your own kombucha. So first, you might not have ever seen kombucha, so if not, this is what kombucha looks like. And we'll go through, it is a drink. It's a probiotic rich fermented sweet tea. There are 5 things I'd like to talk about today. 1, how I got started. 2, what exactly kombucha is, and 3 potential benefits. 4, we're also going to talk about maybe some things you should watch for or be careful with if you're going to start making kombucha at home. And 5, then we'll wrap up with a demonstration of how to make your own kombucha in your own house. This is also something you can purchase in stores, but I highly recommend trying to make some at home. It will save you immense amounts of money if you're doing this. So the reason I started taking kombucha was my personal health. About 7 years ago, I had chronic constipation, severe bloating. I saw doctors, I saw specialists, and I wasn't being given real help. Pretty much just told, you know, I got a sensitive system and I'm stuck with it. So I looked into other options and changed the way that I ate. I went, you know, I've been vegetarian before, I went paleo, I tried a variety of things, and there's a few elements that really helped me to find healing, and that's a longer story for another day. But one of the many elements that I found useful in my travels through that unhealthy period of my life was this drink, was kombucha. And it saved me money in many ways by making my own, and that has to do with what kombucha is. So as we mentioned, kombucha is this probiotic rich fermented tea. So the probiotics in it meant that I no longer had to purchase probiotics from a drugstore to bring them home and pop a pill, and I'm someone who doesn't like to take pills if I can avoid it. So anytime I can get something from a whole food, I'll do that instead. And this tea does not actually taste sweet the way I make it. You can buy some that, or even sweeten your own at home, but that sweet part is eaten up by yeast and bacteria during the making process. But we'll get into that when we get to step 5. So we've talked about why I started taking kombucha myself personally. Also, let me say I happen to love the way it tastes, so I've really enjoyed that. 2, what actually kombucha is, this probiotic rich drink. And 3, now let's talk about some of the potential benefits. And the benefits are wide and far. So I've mentioned my personal, things that I found was especially with digestion. Some people I know have taken kombucha for acne. There is also, if you go online and you research this, you'll hear people making, claims about mental health. There was a study in 2012 talking about the potential of a drink such as kombucha helping with prostate cancer. Even in preventative measures, it's an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, so that affects your general immune system. With all that said, it could be, this real great addition to a already healthy diet and a lifestyle of exercise. Those things, nothing's going to replace those. So generally, eat your greens, still move your body, but kombucha can be a part of that. With all that said, as a scientist myself, I do feel it important to say there have not been enough studies. There have been some studies on kombucha, but not really enough to say verifiably, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is going to help you. It's worth trying, but we really, as far as science goes, we would need more scientific studies to definitively say something is or is not working due to that. But it's you know, either way, like I said, I find it tasty. I find it does help me, myself personally in my life, and you might too. So it's something worth a shot. It's not there to replace your doctor or medicine in any way. So the fourth thing we wanted to talk about was things to watch for. So if you're making kombucha at home, if you're buying it at the store, you don't have to be as concerned with this first item. But if you're making it at home, we will, you'll see this at the end of the video, what everything should look like. You can see this particular kombucha batch that I have is marvelously clear. That is not always the case, and that can be okay. But if you get some kind of weird mold on it and something looks really off or smells really funky, and you'll learn that as time goes on, but definitely seeing something odd, like, you know, a growing mold, like you would maybe see, you know, mildew outside, that's not good. When in doubt, throw it out. That is a fermenting golden rule for anything. You know, I make sauerkraut, I ferment butternut squash, anything. When in doubt, throw it out if you're not sure how something looks. So you don't want to mess with that. You do need an acidic environment to make kombucha. The pH level will be around 3, and we'll get into that again during our 5th step of showing how to actually make it. If you have concern about acidic foods for the enamel on your teeth or any other reason, rinse your mouth out after drinking kombucha. Just like I also enjoy a glass of wine, and after I drink a glass of wine for the sake of my teeth or even coffee, I tend to rinse my mouth out a few times just to help to get some of that acid out of my mouth and away from my teeth. Also, when you do start drinking something like kombucha, whether or not it's something like this that you made at home or whether or not it's something you bought at the store, start slow. You know, I see these big containers of kombucha, and it's like, dear gosh, don't drink the whole thing at once if you've never had it. Anytime you start anything new, even the healthiest thing in the world, you want to start slow to see how your body reacts to it. So I would say maybe seriously just a 1/4 cup to start with, and you really don't need more than 1/2 cup of kombucha a day to realize some benefits from it. So as Americans, we tend to overdo and do everything bigger and better, and yeah, that's not really bigger and better. Moderation's a good idea. So 1/2 cup and you're good to go. And now I'm going to take you inside and we'll go to our 5th step. So we've talked about why I chose to do this. We've talked about what it is, some benefits, and some things to watch for. So now our final thing that we'd like to do is show you how at least I make kombucha from start to finish. See you inside. Okay, welcome inside. As you can see, my clothes are different because it's a different day for me, but this should just be mere minutes for you. So I hope you already heard part 1 where we talked about what kombucha is and some benefits of it and why I personally take it. I'm going to try to speak pretty loud because I'm not sure how well the microphone, I have nothing fancy. My video recorder is like 20 years old, so not sure how well it will pick this up. So we'll do the best we can. How we make kombucha. I'm heating up water as we speak, and I make a batch that is 3 times larger than the first batch I ever made. So when you're starting, you'll want to do about 1/3 of what I'm doing. I will tell you what we're going to do, and then we're going to do it, and then I will repeat, you know, amounts of ingredients so that you can write those down if you like. So, and I've got my cheat sheet here so I don't screw anything up. I'm going to, during this video, I'm working with 7.5 cups of water because, and again, that's 3 times what I used to do. I'll give you the 1/3 amounts at the end as well. And then I'm going to add some sugar. And I happen to get just organic sugar, but pretty much any sugar you want to buy. Turbano sugar works well too. Raw sugar works fine. I'm going to add 3/4 cup of that. And then 6 bags of tea. I've used oolong, I really like, but it's a little pricey. So sometimes I'll use just a Trader Joe's breakfast tea. I've also used green teas. Today we're going to do 3 English breakfasts, 3 green teas. And then after that, we're going to add some already made kombucha. So the first time you ever make kombucha, you will need to buy 1 jar of, just a regular drinking jar of kombucha to get it started. You also will need to borrow something called a Scoby. You'll see this in more detail in a minute, but inside this jar I have what us kombucha makers call a Scoby Hotel, which is basically a group of Scobies. From or through Bounty and Soul, they can get a hold of me if you're interested in a free Scoby. I'm not out here to sell them. I grow them all the time. So I would give you a Scoby. All that you would need is a container to put it in, and that will get your kombucha started. And then you can grow your own Scobies. Scoby, by the way, stands for, it's S-C-O-B-Y. That's S-C-O-B-Y, and it is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. And that is how the fermented kombucha, I'm hearing the water going, that's how the fermented kombucha actually, what it is it's drawing yeast and bacteria from the air. And this Scoby that we have is like a starter. It's already got yeast and bacteria that grew around me here and before I lived here from Wisconsin. I've been maintaining these Scobies for about 7 years now, so it's pretty much still from that first Scoby, which a lot of people will call that the mother Scoby. I don't know. It's just a gelatinous, weird feeling thing. I'm going to turn off the water before it starts whistling like crazy. And this is how we're going to make it. So those are the, let's see, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 ingredients. 5 ingredients we're going to put in. So the water's on its way. I usually get it just beneath a boil, lest I break my jar. And I'm going to add 3/4 cup of sugar. 1, 2, 3. And unlike some kinds of baking, this is not like you have to weigh everything to be super precise. Some recipes add a little more, some a little less. Now don't think this is going to be, oh my gosh, that's a lot of sugar if you're like me, because this yeast and bacteria are going to eat it. That is their food. Water's starting to go down. I'm going to add the water. So this is just beneath a boil. Again, boiling's fine. I just don't boil it all the way because I love this jar. And I got it from a farm in Wisconsin. I don't know if I could get it easily again. And you don't have to have this kind of jar, any kind of jar. I started with a real small jar, just a quart mason jar, because I started originally by making a lot less, about 1/3 of what we're doing here. Let's see. I'm just going to stir that up, because the goal here, can you see me through the fog? The goal here is to dissolve the sugar into the water. And if I already had my tea bags open, which when I'm on my own, I do, but with y'all here, I get distracted by your charmingness. I haven't opened them up yet. So I'm going to open up all the tea bags. If you use a bulk tea, that's fine as well. You would just get your tea, oh gosh, what do they call those? It's where you put bulk tea into like this, they're usually little metal containers. Anyways, I have one, but that's not what I use here. One thing that I'll say is a lot of folks will say that whatever kind of tea you're using, you have to use the same kind of tea. Whatever kind of sugar you're using, you have to use the same kind of sugar. I have not found that to be true, but if I am going to change my tea, I usually do something like we're doing today, where I go half and half. Let me grab a scissors for a moment. I cut off the paper ends because if I hung them up here, they're not going to hit my water. So I just cut off the paper bits. And then I toss the whole thing in there. I will let the tea there. I don't think of it as being too strong. You want a sweet, which we've got from our 3/4 cup of sugar. And now with these 6 bags of tea, again, 7.5 cups of water in there, you let that sit for, say, 10 minutes, especially with a black tea, it's going to get pretty strong. If you are a tea connoisseur and you know that letting green tea sit for more than a few minutes can make it taste sort of bitter, I have not found that to be a problem with kombucha. Again, because everything changes through the fermentation process. So I'm going to let this sit now for... Well, I'm going to let it sit with the tea bags at least 10 minutes. Sometimes I just let it sit for an hour or till I get around to it. It's pretty warm, so let me get hot pots. I'm going to scoot it out of the way. And what we're going to do now is I'm just going to talk to you for a moment about what goes in next. So we've got the first 3 ingredients, the water, the sugar, the tea bags. Next is going to come some already kombucha, already made kombucha that you purchased at a store for the first time. You're going to go to 1.5 cups. 1.5 cups to go with the same amount, with the 7.5 cups of water. If you're going with the 1.5 cups of kombucha, when you add it, you're going to add it after you've removed the tea bags. So I need to let this cool first. So let me back up a little bit. I'm letting my fresh, sweetened, strong tea, I'm letting it brew so it gets nice and strong. Then I'm going to remove the tea bags. Then I have to let it get cool, like to room temperature. That's going to take hours. So I'm not going to go through the next step with you right now because that will take hours. But once it's cooled, you're going to add 1.5 cups of the kombucha that you bought. And you're going to add the Scoby that you got from a friend. You can also buy them online. You can buy them at, I think, Cultured Health maybe sells them. So you can definitely buy Scobies online. You can contact Bounty and Soul, who can get a hold of me. And I'm happy to donate you a Scoby. Sometimes you have to wait for me to grow another. But this is what they look like. I know I'm making a weird face because it feels funny. I, by the way, washed my hands really well before doing this, because if you just manhandle this Scoby with dirty hands, you're introducing different bacteria to it. So I wash up real good. Some people will actually like sanitize like crazy. They'll bleach their counters, everything. It's not me, but I'm sure if you look on Google, you're going to see, I've seen people wear air masks when they make their kombucha. Again, that's not me. And instead, I look at the acidity of my product, and I look at how it smells and how it looks. So these things make a difference. So this living thing, this is actually several Scobies together. And I'll separate one. Well, this is an old one. Sometimes when they get this old, I give it to my chickens instead. My dog loves it too. I've even dehydrated it myself. If you make smoothies, you can throw this into a smoothie. It usually is not like a donut. It's usually full all the way through. So this is a thin one. Usually mine are much thicker. So after our sweetened strong tea has cooled to room temperature, remember, 1.5 cups of kombucha, and because I'm making so much, I would throw in all these Scobies. I would put all of these into my container. Let me just wipe that off. And just to show you, then I'm going to let it sit. So I would let it sit, fermenting. So just room temperature, just a dark area. I actually keep it in this exact item I'm standing in front of because there's drawers underneath, and I put it inside actually a cabinet down there. I open the cabinet, it's dark. I let it sit there for 5 to 7 days. In summer, 4 to 5 days is usually plenty. In winter, it can even go as much as 10 days because I keep my house really cold. It's rare I run the heat here in North Carolina. Then, after it has sat in the dark at room temperature, this is what you're going to see. Voila. So, super time-lapse photography. We have now passed by about a week, and I don't have the lid on tight. While I'm letting something ferment, I want that yeast and bacteria from the air to get into my product. So this is an aerobic, or with air, fermentation, unlike the anaerobic fermentations that also exist. So I also don't want bugs flying in there, even though in the cabinet I don't think that's a problem, but I just lay a lid like that. That's it. That's all I do. And if you're not comfortable with that, you could lay a towel over something. A thin towel would be the better, just to let some of the air get through. And you can see my Scoby's floating around in there. Again, clean hands or you don't do this. I don't know if you can see it, but I started with about 3 Scobies in this, and I now have 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what happens. When you put the Scoby in, as it sits there, a new one will form. And you'll get a whole new layer. So part of what I put in there is there, and they like each other a lot, so they grab onto one another. But now I have this new Scoby, and that's how you're growing Scobies. So when this is ready, I'm going to go to my Scoby Hotel, open it up, and I'll, again, with clean hands, I'll wiggle in here. Some people will never put their hands in there. They would say that's a big no-no, and they'll use tongs or something, but I feel like my hands, well washed, are just as clean as tongs. But look at how beautiful this color is on this Scoby. Let me pick this up. That is creamy, white, and beautiful. The underside gets what's sometimes called a beard. It looks like something's hanging from it. That's totally fine, totally normal. If this top side did not look nice and white, maybe a little bit of brown on it, I would question whether or not it was okay. If you saw mold growing on that top, for sure, like anything fuzzy, you see fuzz instead of this super creamy smoothness, throw it out. It's not worth it. Definitely throw it out. And again, you can Google for pictures of people who, made bad ones. Fortunately, I have nothing bad I can show you for the last 5 or so years. It did take a while before my Scoby got strong enough that I never had to throw one out. So in my Scoby Hotel, I put back on the lid, and I'll store that in the refrigerator until I'm making my next batch. Also, you may notice in my Scoby Hotel, there's some liquid. That's because I pour kombucha in it. So since I know I'm going to be using some of these Scobies to finish off the one we started today, I'm not going to bother to pour more liquid in here, more kombucha. Yeah, it's not water you're pouring in there, it's kombucha. Because these Scobies, being alive, they still are going to want to eat a little bit. So giving them a little kombucha, because this is now a living product. This is filled with probiotics. I could show you, but in the interest of time, because I know video watching has probably gotten really long, I do have little pH strips that I purchased at a science store back in Wisconsin forever ago. And I would test the pH of this. And I want to make sure that my pH is around 3. Usually mine, I go for very acidic, is closer to 2. If we took the pH of this hot tea, oh, it's too hot to touch. If we took the pH of the one that we just made, we haven't added any kombucha, we're still letting it brew, our pH will be substantially higher. So that's a good way. You look at visually, how does your Scoby look? And then when you're new to it, I highly recommend taking the pH of it. And the taste, I'll just drink a little bit. I love it. I will be honest, my husband does not, because there's a bubbliness to it. And usually when I'm going to pour it out of this into my saving jar. In this case, this is actually kombucha that has already been in the saving jar. I cheated a little bit just for the sake of getting a video done in one go. But usually when I pour it, it bubbles like crazy and it foams overboard. Okay, the only reason it's not doing that now is because I had already poured this earlier. So unfortunately, you're not going to see that. But there is this effervescent, is that how you pronounce it? But a bubbliness to it. And mine, the way you do it like this, it will taste almost like a vinegar. I think it's very lovely. Most of my friends like it. If you want it sweeter, you can mix some juice in here. You could add some sugar to it. Any of these options are okay. And some people even do a double ferment. I do not. So I won't even try to tell you that. Once again, I'm going to give you the amounts. The amounts we used today was 7.5 cups of hot water, 3/4 cup of sugar, 6 bags of tea, 1.5 cups of already made kombucha, and then I use about 3 Scobies, 3 of those discs that you saw, to make my triple batch. If you're starting out, I highly recommend making 1/3 of that. For those people who don't love math the way I do, I will tell you that is going to be 2.5 cups of hot water, 1/4 cup of sugar, 2 bags of tea, 1/2 of a cup of already made kombucha tea, and just 1 Scoby. So you start out with 1 Scoby, and then as you get your savings or your Scoby Hotel going, you can start to increase the amount that you make, however much you like. I hope this was useful to you. Again, I drink about 1/2 a cup of this every morning. And if you don't really like the taste unsweetened, I strongly recommend, instead of adding more sugar or juice, which has a lot of sweetness in it, give yourself a little time to get used to it. Give it a week and see if you can adapt to it. And you might find it as refreshing as I do. Thank you so much for listening and for being here. And certainly no hesitation in me giving away Scobies. As long as I have them, they're yours for the taking.